Did you know we have a thriving global community of like-minded ancestral home cooks and homesteaders? Every day on our Discord forum, we are discussing what we're cooking, what we're growing, what we're thinking about, what our latest struggles are, and supporting each other to fully embrace this beautiful lifestyle. As a patron member, you can also choose to access an extra private podcast feed, which includes monthly intimate chats where Andrea and I talk in depth about what's happening in our lives and kitchens. There are over 90 recordings waiting for you there right now. In addition, we've got a massive collection of inspiring and helpful downloads for you, including many recipes and videos. And once a month, you'll get to visit with myself, Andrea, and the community as we come together live and in person. Visit ancestralkitchenpodcast.com for all the details on how to join us. Come be part of our world and change yours.
Ask us anything, we said. Grill us like a cheese sandwich. And you did. Our podcast supporters sent in questions for Alison and I to answer for this final episode of 2024, and we had a lot of fun answering them. Some of them were crazy. Some would take an entire podcast episode to answer thoroughly, and they were all really fun. Like, what are some non-ancestral things you do, or ancestral things you don't plan to ever do, or tell us about Alison's past life. Alison and I also came with some questions for each other. We did not tell each other in advance what they would be, and we had a lot of fun answering them. We also recorded our after show and included it in this main feed episode as our gift to you, so it is extra long and juicy. What other questions would you have asked? What are your answers to these questions, and do you think we answered them right? Tell us your thoughts after you hear this episode. Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen Podcast.
I'm Alison, a European town dweller living in England.
And I'm Andrea, living on a family farm in Northwest Washington State, USA.
Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen.
Hello, Alison. Happy New Year.
Yeah, welcome to our celebration episode number 99. I can't believe we got there.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And the only reason it's not 100, we actually have 100 episodes, is because I posted a bonus episode one time and I didn't number it. So
yeah. So this is really number 100.
A little bit. But we also have an awesome 100 coming in the new year. So
Indeed. So, just before we get started, I want to remind listeners who maybe didn't listen to last week's episode that we are changing our supporter platform. So all of our existing wonderful supporters will see a new platform in the new year and new updates, a new way of us chatting, which is exciting. And that also we have a mailing list for the podcast now. So if you want to hear the latest from Andrea and I, you can go to our website, which is Ancestral Kitchen Podcast. And at the top of every page, there is a little sign up box, which Rob put up there. Pop your name and your email address in there. And very soon we will have some little email missives going out.
I'm excited about that, Alison. So many people have asked me for that, and I just haven't. Rob had to save us. So, and everybody keep signing up for Patreon, because you will see all the changes come through there, but it's going to take a while, and we need you so we can pay Rob to keep building our new platform.
To help pay for it.
He's making something amazing, and it will be saving everybody money at the end of the day. So this is the best part.
Yeah.
It's just making things more efficient.
And us.
And then all your dollars are going directly into the podcast. Alison, do you have any... I'll just say that my last food was not very exciting, but it was delicious. And it was just a simple caldo verde. And way back, like episode 4 or 5 or something, when we talked about our 5 favorite books. Do you remember that?
Oh, in the old days.
In the old days.
I was very young
recording then, upstairs in the girls' bedroom with the microphone attached to a chair.
I was in a different country. Yeah.
You were in Italy back in those vintage years.
The microphone's still attached to a chair.
Are we getting nostalgic at the end of this year, Allison?
Oh, I think we probably are, yes.
Anyways, I mentioned a soup cookbook, and that soup cookbook
I remember.
not only has a listener written to me and said she knew the monk who wrote that book, and he was just a wonderful, wonderful person, and she just had all these good things to say, and that just warmed my heart to hear. I've shared about it, and a ton of people have told me that they got the book and that they're making so many soups out of it, and it's just very, very simple, seasonal, traditional type soup cookbook. But I made the one in there that I have made the most of any soup, which is caldo verde. And that is just a winner every time. So that was my...
What's the book? You haven't said the book's name.
Didn't? Oh, wow.
No, I don't think you did.
It's the Monastery Soups book. And I can drop that in the show notes so everybody can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
What did you eat?
Okay, so you had that last night, did you? Did you have that last night?
And I actually, this isn't in the recipe, but I cooked like a stew hen first. Like I simmered a stew hen in water for probably 2 hours, and then took it out and used that as the broth and shredded the meat back into it. So that meat isn't in the original recipe, but I often throw it in.
Yeah.
What about you, Alison?
Yeah, I had duck liver, which I pan fried very quickly, with some cabbage. Cabbages are just looking so beautiful at the market at the moment. Really green and kind of flamboyant in their curly leaves. And then last night we cooked a lot of root vegetables in the oven, and there was some left over. And we're getting Crown Prince squashes from the market at the moment, which are really kind of a dense sugary squash, not a kind of a watery one. And so then when you put that in the oven, it's reducing in size even more and getting even more kind of caramelized flavors. So there's some of that left over. I just threw that in the pan at the very end of the liver cooking to warm up. And so yeah, squash, cabbage and duck liver.
I'd eat it. That sounds wonderful. Did Gabe eat the duck liver?
Oh, the duck liver. That's interesting. Yesterday I made duck liver with my apple and mushroom and kind of onion cream recipe that I've devised, and he ate about half of it. The reason I had the duck liver was because there was one liver left, and I thought if I put that in there, it's just going to be too much liver and he's not going to eat it all. So yeah, he ate half of it, but I'm thinking I'm going to have to make a pate soon, I think, because, you know, the bacon in the pate really makes a difference to him. So kind of okay with the 10-year-old and liver thing. Could be better, but could be worse.
Oh my gosh, I think he's doing so great. You know, he gets the exposure to it. And I think one thing we learned from Courtney when we recorded with her was just letting them see everybody else at the table is eating it and is happy to be eating it. That has an effect that kind of kicks in later. So, yeah. Yeah,
I think you're probably right. I'm trusting that.
Well, Alison, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of questions. So this is our celebration episode, and you and I, we called out to the patrons, both in the patron platform and in our Discord, and asked for questions, anything people wanted to ask. We didn't take anything off the table. We said it doesn't have to be about food. It can be whatever you want. I took out the most inappropriate questions and just kept the good ones. I'm just kidding. Nobody asked anything bad. And we have a lot, and they're from all over the place. So I tried to mark down where everybody is from, and I think I got it all right. If I said the wrong state or country, please forgive me. And I also have a few questions for you from me, Alison. If it works out, then instead of recording an after show, because when I kind of mapped out the time for everything, we're going to go way over time. I was thinking, let's just put the after show in the show today. So it's like a little New Year gift for everybody.
Okay.
So you just get an extra long episode with tons of questions, some of which could be an entire episode. I don't know if you noticed that, Alison, when I sent you the questions.
Yeah, the ones you've shown me. I don't know about the questions you haven't shown me.
Yeah, some of them could be an entire episode. So are you ready, Alison?
I'm ready.
If you've been around ancestral food for very long or listened to the podcast for just a few episodes, you know liver is a superfood, and Alison and I both love it. You're looking at a food packed with vitamins A, K, a broad spectrum of B vitamins, CoQ10, bioavailable iron, plus many essential minerals. Liver is your first stop when seeking to gain energy and restore your health. Not only is it a delicacy and staple of traditional diets, it's the first thing most animal predators go for when they're hunting. Are you looking for a good way to work liver into your daily life, but getting it on the table just isn't happening yet or as much as you'd like? Or maybe, like I went through earlier this year, you're pregnant and you're pretty sick and not much food is staying down. This is where liver capsules come in. Alison and I are both supplementing our ancestral diets with liver capsules from One Earth Health. We get all the incredible benefits of liver, even when we're on the road, or preparing non-liver meals for our family, or we just can't get a hold of a liver, and the sourcing and preparation has all been handled for us. One Earth Health produces nutritious organ capsules from 100% grass-fed, New Zealand-raised cattle. Support the pod by purchasing through our link. You'll get 15% off your first order and 5% off subsequent orders. Go to ancestralkitchenpodcast.com/liver or check the show notes.
All right, you read the first question, Alison. And you can also say who it's from.
First question. Okay, yeah, I will. So the first question is from Kirsten M., who is a supporter who lives in Canada. Hi,
Hello.
Kirsten. And she asks, obviously, both of you love the modern aspects of your kitchens too. Your mock meal, Vitamix, freezers, Alison's fancy composter, ear infection interventions, the scientific explanations you discover for why ancestral cooking works. So I know you guys are nuanced in your approach to ancestral living. I'm curious how you might see the limitations of ancestral living and where you actually prefer to apply technology to the task at hand. Also, our ancestors can't have been right about everything because they are human and make mistakes just like us. What is your rubric for deciding if an ancestral practice is a good one? Andrew, do you want to start with that?
That is such a good question. And I definitely felt like this was one we could sit down and work on for a whole episode.
Yeah.
Way to go, Kirsten. She actually lives pretty close to me. She lives closer to me than my mom does. We just have a border in between us. So the limitations of ancestral living and where I prefer to apply technology, well, you probably already know that one of my favorite things is plumbing. I love plumbing.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the most miraculous inventions in history. And plumbing is actually good plumbing is the source of the reduction of a lot of diseases that people used to suffer from because it brought water to people and waste away from people. So that isn't always in existence in ancestral circumstances. And we also see lots of plague type things related to bad plumbing, when you think about dysentery and things like that. So plumbing, and I do love electricity in the house, and we live off grid. So I feel like I have a really precious sort of appreciation for it. So the limitations of ancestral living, sometimes not always hygienic, and I have gotten used to the convenience of being able to flip a switch and turn the light on or flip a switch and turn the stove on. And it definitely takes a lot more effort to use a wood stove. And my rubric for deciding if an ancestral practice is a good one, the farther back it goes, I feel like that's when I see it on every continent in most tribes and back to 5,000 years ago, I feel like, well, yeah, fermenting your grains is probably a good idea. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. What about you, Alison?
Okay. Yeah, so there's kind of two questions here, isn't there? The limitations of ancestral living and where you prepare, to apply technology. I think for us, kind of talking about Rob and me, I think we apply technology where it's more beneficial. And by that, I mean it's beneficial to taste, to health, to the resources we have available, or to our sanity. So, for example, I'm using a slow cooker a lot in my kitchen. I'm not lighting a fire, or I'm not going outside and making a hay cooker, because it just means that resource-wise and sanity-wise, that's beneficial to me. And I apply the same things, for health. Is the technology going to make it more healthy for me? Is it going to make it tasty? And that's kind of a balance, because I'm not just there for taste. I'm there for health and taste. So that's where I prefer to apply technology, to stay sane mainly. The second question, the rubric for deciding whether an ancestral practice I hear about is a good one. The first thing is, do I feel I need it? So if I read about something and, everything's perfect in that area of my life, then I'm not going to really be drawn to it. But if I know that, for example, when I learnt about how light affects sleep, I was like, well, yeah, my sleep's not good. So this could be potentially beneficial to me. And then from that, once I've tried it, how does it feel? Does it feel like I'm benefiting? Do I enjoy it? Is it a struggle? Is it worth the benefits? Right. And probably somewhere along in that process, I'll have done some research. So like you're saying, is there evidence from tribes, societies using it in the past, or living like that in the past with the blue lights? They didn't use blue light glasses, but they lived very differently to us. Or is there scientific evidence? Sometimes I'll go and read papers and I'll say, what's the science around this as well? So all of those things kind of mush together, and then I have my own kind of path working through them to decide whether it's a good thing. I think really relying on my own sense of how does it feel and how does it affect me over time. And sometimes that takes months and months and months to figure out. Which is why it's a journey, we're still carrying on, and we will be carrying on as, hopefully till the day I die, I'll still be looking to improve
and the
my
months
life.
and months of figuring it out, I feel like, is also coupled with, for me anyways, it takes me a long time to integrate something fully into my life. So you might know cognitively, I want sourdough bread for every meal. It takes time to absorb that, or not every meal, but like every time you have bread, you have sourdough. It takes time to absorb that, and you have to sort of change other habits of your life that support that. So that does take time.
Yeah.
Great answer,
Absolutely.
Alison. I have a question now. This is a funny one from Megan, who is in Kansas, and she is a podcast supporter and also our VA. So hello, Megan. And she said, For sure, we have to know your pet peeves, big and minor. A minor one for me is when people hang their jackets and overshirts on the dining room chairs. So silly, but it really irritates me for some reason. Megan, every time I see someone hang their jacket on the chair right now, I just want to send you a picture of it.
Yeah.
Alison, do you have a pet peeve?
Oh,
and does
I
Rob?
do. Don't get me started on the... Yeah, don't get me started on the big ones, because the big ones, well, that's partially why we're doing the podcast, isn't it? That's a big peeve. But little ones. So I don't like it when people leave drawers open. I just feel like I go around the day kind of just closing drawers after people and pushing the things back in that are stopping the drawers being shut properly. Putting things back in different places. I know where everything is in my kitchen. And I really work hard to try and get Rob to say, this is the home for the steamer, this is the home for the sieves, this is the home for the grinder that we grind our seeds in. And now we've moved recently, it's taken a while to re-establish where everything is. And I keep opening a cupboard with one hand while I'm also stirring something. I look down, I'm like, where's the seed grinder gone? So that one, I could go on for a long time. Washing, brought in when it's still wet, which really annoys me. Oh, it's dry. No, it's not dry, it's wet. And yeah, Rob's, I don't know whether I should confess this, but
you should.
Rob's pet peeve of what I do is that we are a hanky family, not a tissue family. We carry hankies, and I tend to leave hankies around places. So sometimes my pockets have like 4 hankies in each pocket. Sometimes they have none. And then you'll find one down the side of the sofa or down by the side of the bed or in a drawer. And he just hates the fact that I can't keep hold of hankies. But men have pockets. And not all my clothes have pockets. Fair. And I don't want to distend my sleeve by putting this massive hanky up it in winter. So, yeah, if you asked him, that's what he'd say about that. I'm hoping to overcome my hanky problem in the future. Okay, how about you? I want to hear yours.
Okay, it's so funny your pet peeve is drawers, because Gary's pet peeve about me is leaving the cupboards open. He comes in the kitchen and he's like, how are you not hitting your head on these cupboards? I'm like, well, you're taller than me, so that's the start. My pet peeve is when people leave their chairs out from the table and then you're trying to walk around and you're just tripping over, breaking your legs on all these chairs. When the kids leave our doors to the house open, so cats and dogs just wander in, and definitely chickens pooping on the porch really drives me nuts. So we're trying to eliminate all the wandering chickens, but they like to come down and do that.
That's very kind of them.
Yes, it is.
Okay, let's move on to another question. We've got another Megan this time, who is also a supporter, and she lives in Michigan. And Megan is wonderful and has her own podcast called The Tea's Made. You might have heard me on her podcast. She says, I always love to hear about some non-ancestral things you do, or ancestral things you don't do or plan to do. Andrea, that one.
Well, I haven't incorporated everybody's favorite ice bathing thing. I still don't know if I'll ever do that. I don't know. Maybe. I feel like it'd be fun to do polar dips and stuff every once in a while, but I don't know about the everyday cold shower thing. So that's an ancestral thing I don't know if I'm planning to do or not, but never say never. And an ancestral thing or a non-ancestral thing that I do, recording a podcast. Definitely. You and I talk about this all the time, the push and pull of, well, we need to be creating this stuff online, sending each other emails, reading notes from Megan, whatever it is. But then also we're like, light a candle and read a book. So that feels like a tension that I am still learning how to balance. And probably reading a lot. I like to read, and ancestrally you would more so listen. And I still bake with sugar. I still use that. So that's probably not very ancestral of me. What about you, Alison?
Yeah, I think some of the ancestral things I don't do, like you, I don't do the ice baths. You know, there's a group of ladies here who go down to the river in the morning, every morning, and dip. It's been so cold recently. Yeah. I was out for a walk with Gabriel the other morning, and it was about 8 a.m, and there was a pair of boots and some clothes on the bridge. And someone was obviously in the river. And when we walked back past the same spot, the boots and the clothes are gone. And it was freezing cold. I mean, like, it'd been snowing. And I'm like, oh, the group's just there. I could just go and do it. But I haven't, like you. The ancestral things I don't do, it's kind of the same, you know. I work online. I'm writing all the time online. I'm recording podcasts with you. I'm sorting out tech. I'm answering questions. I'm dealing with things online a lot. And that has resulted really in me having online friends, because I've met some amazing people that I definitely want to be friends with, you know, meeting you and creating a friendship with you over the last kind of 4 years. Ellie over in Australia, all the supporters who are over in the US, supporters in continental Europe and all over the UK that you know, I haven't met in person yet. And I love what those friendships bring to me, but at the same time, I feel the lack of what they'd be like in person. So that's one of the non-ancestral things I do, certainly maintain wonderful friendships online. Do you love oats? Want to try your hand at a traditional Scottish oat fermentation? Suhan's is just that. It was made in Scotland for centuries and will give you both a creamy, easy-to-digest porridge and a tangy probiotic drink. My video course, Suhan's The Scottish Oat Ferment, over at the Fermentation School, We'll guide you through everything you need to know to create these 2 ancestral foods in your own kitchen, no matter what equipment you have. Head to ancestralkitchen.com/Sewans, ancestralkitchen.com/Sewans, SOWANS, or click the link in the show notes to get a 10% discount automatically applied.
Well, I have a question now from Allie, who is one of our podcast supporters in the US, and she is in Washington. Pretty sure. I hope I am correct on that.
Okay.
So she said, I have a question for the 100th episode, and it's mostly for Andrea, but I'd love to hear Alison's answer also. How do you organize your day/manage your time to accomplish all the things involved in ancestral living? As mothers taking care of yourselves and children and homestead chores, how do you find or make the time to live life and tackle new projects and experiences? Personally, it seems like I'm always in a position where I have to choose between visiting friends and family and getting things done around the farm, or I have to go to work and the bread doesn't get baked or the broth doesn't get canned, etc. I'm sure there is a more elegant way to pose that question, but it's something that's almost always on my mind. Very curious to hear what you have to say about that, Alison.
Well, I don't have a farm like you, but I would say things don't get done. And sometimes I don't like that, but I have to deal with it. Things don't get done with the frequency that I want them done. And sometimes I have to choose one thing over another. The important, I'd say, tool in my toolbox around this is routine, because I think once you get into a routine, it's much easier to maintain a routine than it is to be sporadically trying to grab at things and do them at various times. So, the routines of the day, we do kefir at the same time every day. The routines of the week, I'm doing things with my sourdough bread at certain times in the week. I'm making boza once a week. And we're going to the market once a week. If I can manage to block things into routines, I actually wrote a blog post today about my kitchen routines, which is really long, which I will link in the show notes because it's really quite apt to this. But I feel like routine is my friend, and I also have to downgrade my desires for everything that I get done, work out what's most important and try and work on that. How about you?
Well,
at a farm, what do you do?
Well, I don't have a farm on the scale that Allie has. So, but I have 4 kids and a few animals. So I guess that's why she asked mostly, or she said it's mostly.
Yeah.
One thing is to straight out of the gate acknowledge the fact that the lifestyle that we are pursuing is not supported by modern life. And I know, Alison, that Rob is very much an anchor for you, and Gary is for me also.
Yes.
And he's constantly reminding me of that, because I'll say something like what Allie said. I have to choose between this or that. And he always says, people have nothing to do other than go around and do things now, that you're not expected to be doing something at home, to be productively working in your home. You're expected to be going to gymnastics class, going out to coffee, meeting for dinner or drinks, or I don't know, making things up because I don't know what people do, but you're expected to be doing all these social things that have been created to fill the void of having a productive home. So that's the first thing to remember, is our lifestyle doesn't always match the modern culture that we have. Something else that I've thought a lot about when I've considered this, because Allie, I have chewed on this, I'm like you, I think about it pretty much every day, is when you read through lots of old books, you find that people often had like a visiting day. So this is the day that they see everybody. And I feel like that we sort of have that, Allie, I think it's probably similar for Allie, where we live far enough out that we don't just pop into town and do things like a la carte. every day or whatever. We more so have one day where we go and do everything. And in my head, I kind of think of that as my visiting day. And then I need to have what I call a normal day for the majority of my weekdays. So
that's good.
yeah, so like one day of the week, we will go do choir or the kids' music lessons, or I'll see the chiropractor, or if I have to pick something up at town, then that kind of all happens on that day. I'm packing meals for everybody for one day. Everybody's sort of prepared. We have some audio school book that we're going to listen to in the car, or Jacob will sometimes also be reading his books in the car. Just everybody knows that we're going to be gone and out for a big chunk of time. And then the other days aren't interrupted, because it is really hard, like she was saying, with the broth or the bread and things. These things don't take a lot of hands-on time, but you're expected to be there like every 2 hours to do something to it.
Yeah.
So that way I have the more uninterrupted days. I would also...
I think the batching is a really good thing. I mean, that's what gurus suggest, isn't it? With technical stuff like you batch your emails, you batch this, you batch that. And it just means your energy is in the right place for that.
Right.
And then when you're not doing that, your energy can be somewhere else more fully.
I think of it as stopping and starting. I can't stop and start. It's better for me to link things together and flow. And you alluded to routine, Alison, which I was going to say schedule. And I know schedule is a triggering word for some people, but like you said, if you have a routine or a schedule, then that does not mean I stick to the schedule every day. But it means that even if something shifts, I'm at least rotating around this existing schedule. And I know in my head, this time slot didn't happen. It's going to have to roll back around tomorrow or something. And I can post my schedule. I kind of hate doing that, because I don't want people to think that there's a way they should be doing something, and everybody's so different and it's just so unique to each person. But also I find it helpful to see other people's schedules. So I can post our schedule in the, what are we calling it? Treasure trove, the download. I don't know what we call it now.
Yeah.
the downloads page.
The downloads.
If people want to see it, but please don't think that it's this gospel thing that I do every single day, because it totally shifts as it needs to. But it is helpful, like you said, knowing you do the kefir at this time, you do bread on this day or whatever. So, yep.
Yeah, I feel like I would go bonkers if that didn't happen, because it just gives me that rhythm that I can fall into. And then all the other things that are rushing around in my head about stuff that's changing, there's space for that.
Exactly. You're taking things off your executive functioning table and just letting, the schedule VA handle it. Can you read the next question, Alison?
Cool. Yeah, of course I can. So this one is from Katie, who is a podcast supporter who lives in Germany. And it's a question to both of us. What was the first fermented food you ever made? Ooh. And if you could only make one ferment for the rest of your life, what would it be? And she's got a little note at the bottom that says, Andrea, I mean fermented on purpose.
Do you know me, Katie? What?
Not by mistake. Okay. So you go first, Andrea.
I don't know. Probably sourdough bread was the first.
Well, that's the one you made first?
Probably, yeah.
Wow.
And then...
jumping in at the deep end.
Sourdough bread, probably then either kefir or kombucha next, or sauerkraut. I don't know. Okay. But it was probably sourdough bread was the first. What about you, Alison?
My first was sauerkraut, I think. Rob thinks it was milk kefir. So I would just say that those two came very, very quickly, one after the other. Because I remember we were in Italy and we could get some raw goat's milk. So I remember the milk kefir being really one of the very first. But I think we were making sauerkraut at the same time. So one of those two. How about if you could only make one ferment for the rest of your life, what would that be?
That is mean. Why would you say that?
I agree.
I don't know. I don't know. I love sour things, so that's really tough. It would probably be bread or kimchi. I don't know. That's really tough.
Okay. I think for me, it would be bread. Just because it's so wonderful to do, and it does such amazing things to the bread. And I know that Rob can eat bread because I make sourdough bread, and that's a huge thing. And so I think I would miss sourdough bread if I could only make one. It's just hard because I love all the other ferments too, and so do my boys. So
they go together.
I think,
like when I think about sourdough bread, then I think about dipping it in the kimchi juice. And when I think about kimchi, I think about having it,
having some fermented cheese on top.
And then when we think about eating that heart with the fermented kimchi and the cheese on top, then I think about washing it down with a glass of kombucha, and then it's like really hard to pick it all apart. That's such a good question. I'd be curious if people wanted to answer this question in Discord. What was the first fermented food they ever made?
Yeah, that would be nice to read.
I'm going to read a question. You ready?
Okay.
Yeah. This is from Bridget, and she's also in the U.S. She's another podcast supporter. Thank you, Bridget. And she said, how long did it take you each to transition to an ancestral lifestyle? Like, was it cold turkey, or did you make the change gradually?
Do you want me to go with that one? So I still feel like I'm transitioning. I think that, if you look back over the last couple of years, there's lots of things that I've picked up in those few years that I hadn't previously, even though I've been living this way for quite some time. So I feel like in a couple of years' time, there'll be things that I don't know about now that I do, and they'll be part of my life. So I would say I'm still transitioning, and my transition was gradual. So, I found Nourishing Traditions like how long ago? More than that, 13 years ago. We did talk about it in the Nourishing Traditions episode. And really, for the first year, because I was focusing on fertility to try and get my cycle back, that first year was a real deep dive. I went from being raw vegan to eating, whole roast chickens, all the fat, all the bits, all the everything. So that was my first year. But I didn't bring sourdough in until later. I think Gabriel was nearly 2 when that happened. And then pretty soon after that, I remember in the same house, that was when I dropped the iPhone. And then slowly I've been picking up other lifestyle changes with lights and glasses and cold and different types of food, different ways of cooking them. But I feel like I'm still learning all the time. How about you?
I felt very similar to you. It was a very gradual. I never did kind of, I guess. My fast. I feel like it's, if you think of a foot on the accelerator, it's kind of going slow. Then I kind of hop on the freeway and I speed up and I absorb a whole bunch of things for a while. Then I hop off the freeway and I drive real slow and I pick up a couple things, or I maybe maintain, sit in traffic, kind of just stay the same for a while. And then, I get pulled over because I did something too fast. I have to drive over.
Yeah, I know that one.
So I feel like it's been probably I would say gradual for the most part. And when I look back, I think sometimes, oh man, it's taking too long, or I've gone too slow. But at the same time, it's about as fast as I can handle it. So, and I'm nowhere close to where I want to land, if you will. And like you said, I think there's always things I'll be learning. So.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. That's a nice way to live life, I think. Okay, we've got a question here from Tilsha, who is another podcast supporter, and she lives in Washington. She asked for us to talk about our dream ancestral kitchen. She said, you've got no space restrictions, no budget restrictions. If you have modern tools that you'd like or you want to use, it's okay for you to put them in your dream kitchen. And she asked us to talk perhaps a bit about the layout. Now, I probably have to rein you in here, Andrea, because I know you could talk about this until next Tuesday.
Yeah, I was going to say, the rest of the episode will be dedicated to this question. No, this is such a fun question, and there's so much we could discuss here. I think my dream kitchen is probably pretty spacious because I like to do large-scale things like butchering or canning large quantities of things, which I have done in tiny spaces, and that's fine. But, when you have more room to just throw things around and leave the drawers open, then that's helpful. I have also found that working in a big kitchen can be inconvenient. We worked in a really big kitchen when we lived with my cousins in Seattle, and that's a huge kitchen with like multiple ovens, multiple sinks, and the mileage you put in to do things in a big kitchen actually adds up and puts a lot of time on things. But I take inspiration from restaurant kitchens a lot, in that they have stations set up. So that's kind of how my kitchen is, and that's probably how I would do my dream kitchen if I ever added more space on. But I'm kind of turning my little galley kitchen into my dream kitchen as it is by creating spaces. So if you walked into my kitchen, you would probably figure out pretty quickly, this is where I stand whenever I'm doing bread, and this is where I stand whenever I'm doing like chopping things for dinner, putting spices and oils and things. You would probably figure that out pretty quickly just by walking in there. So it would be nice if there was room in the kitchen for like proofing trays that I could, slide things into, like some metal shelving. It'd be nice if there was room for more of my bussing tubs in the kitchen. I didn't have to hoof it out to the balcony to get them every time. It would be nice if the dehydrator could be in the kitchen. Don't have enough power to run it all year right now, but that would be kind of fun to be able to just turn the dehydrator on and have it right in my space. And I actually had all this that I'm describing in our last house, and it was really convenient. Ooh. But I can say it didn't change my life or anything. So I know that, the tiny kitchen is also okay. What about you, Alison?
Yeah. Well, I've really only had tiny kitchens up till now. I think, my dream kitchen, the first thing it would be is warm. I just like being warm. Yeah. And so a warm kitchen, and I like that warmth to come from a stove, like a range. So what we would call an Aga or a Rayburn in the UK. So a big cast iron range that's basically on all the time in winter. And I've got things in ovens and things on the top. Just the heart of my home kind of thing. I'd like there to be a lot of wood. I really love wood to look at. I love the warmth in the colour. I like it to touch. I like wood all around me, so a lot of wood. I'd like it to have a window that looked out over something green, some hills, where I could see the sky, where I could see perhaps a field, maybe some horses or cows, trees, things moving in the wind, that kind of thing. So a lovely view. And then I like people to be in it, because it feels to me like, the kitchen is the heart of my home, and I can express warmth and comfort and welcome through what I'm creating. And so with this lovely warm kitchen, people in there eating, talking, making things, doing stuff together, that would be fun. I feel like beauty is one of the most important drivers in my life. That Aga is there because it's beautiful. The wood is there because it's beautiful. The view is there because it's beautiful. But also all of those things are functional as well. The Aga is doing a good job, and I'm cooking all the things on the same heat that is heating the space. The wood doesn't need any of that horrible stuff to clean it, because it's naturally antimicrobial and antibacterial. The view is keeping me sane and reminding me where my food's come from. So all of those things are functional too. And, moving into this house where I'm sharing with someone has made it really clear to me that, yes, beauty is important to me, but that function is also really important. Like you're saying, not running out to the other side of the kitchen to get something. Or, like I said earlier, not opening a drawer and finding that the thing that I want is not there. So I like my kitchen to be really organised as well, because I want to be able to find things with my eyes shut.
The next question is from Kirsten, the supporter in Canada. She brought us our first question on the episode, and she has another one here.
Yeah.
She has really good questions. So Kristen said, when people are confused about why we would want to go eat the way people used to and pursue an ancestral lifestyle for its holistic health benefits, they usually think, that's nice, but hasn't modern technology, even with its faults, had an overall better impact on our health? After all, we see a much longer lifespan of people today, plus now families don't have to expect only half of their children to make it to adulthood. Not to mention, we don't really have to deal with the plague and deadly disease in the modern world. Do you think this argument stands, or do we need an Andrea history lesson?
Andrea,
do I really go off that much?
Enlightening.
I do.
No, but it's always enlightening. I just remember that Crisco history lesson you gave us when we did the fats episode, and it was amazing. I just sat back and listened.
I remember my brother saying once that he loves watching documentaries or history period pieces or shows with me because he's like, every time we watch them, you have so much to add. Like, oh, did you know that really happened?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so tell us what you think about this one.
Okay, well, this one is another one I've thought about a lot, like Allie's question. Hasn't modern technology, even with its faults, had an overall better impact on our health? I feel like you and I, Alison, would say yes and no, because there are things, it's improved our comfort a great deal. And I've thought about this a lot too, because, I think about that there's, places where you still have to do quite a lot just to physically sustain yourself during the day. And we can flip a switch, turn a tap, things that we don't even consider. And then we have to go ahead and add in going to gyms to exercise or ice bathing because we're not actually crossing a creek with a baby tied to our back or something like that. So we end up forcing discomfort back into our lives because our lives are so comfortable to begin with.
And we pay money for it.
That's the funny part, right? Our ancestors would be like, what? But the lifespan issue is something that'd be interesting to hear Amelia weigh in on. And I've read lots of different anthropologists' decisions and opinions on this, one of which is that longer lifespans is sometimes arguable because when we look at average lifespans, they include all the infants that died at birth or within 6 months of birth. Yeah. And so that throws the overall age down quite significantly. And then Kirsten did say, we don't expect, half our kids to make it anymore. So there are huge benefits, and a lot of them come through sanitation and heating. So a lot of issues that people used to have when you think about all the coughs and the, weaknesses that you saw people have in the old days. Remember, everybody was cold for 70% of the year. And we've discussed this in the episode with Karima and her book on Italian history, where a lot of people historically, they were just freezing with blue fingers most of the time because all the energy that they brought in was used for heating food and not for heating the living spaces. Well, now we have created some ways to heat living spaces, and we've also found that staying at ambient temperature all the time also isn't the best for your body, blah, 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 which is why you have to reintroduce cold and heat to ourselves. But we also have the plumbing as aforementioned. And then if we look at, for the ancestral side of things, there are some ancient cultures, for instance, the Hebrews, and they had way back in the very beginning pages of the Bible, some very, very strict sanitation laws set down. And if more tribes had adopted those sanitation laws, like simple things like, dig your sewers way away from camp, wash and sanitize tools after butchering, these things weren't done, up until like Joseph Lister. People were doing surgeries with dirty tools, so even modern societies weren't doing these basically ancient practices of sanitation. And I'm sure nobody's heard of, the Perizzites or the Hivites or all these other tribes that lived in the old days that were gone now. But the Jewish tribe has survived. And I think that a large part of that is due to these incredible sanitation laws that they followed. So, yes, I think that our ancestors' practices are even more important to consider, because in the face of lack of sanitation and lack of heat, they used these things to survive despite all of that. And so if you take being able to warm your children every day and being able to flush sewage away, and you add to that the benefits of diverse bacterial diet and all of the easily digestible fermented grains and things like that, I think you just get win after win. So that's my opinion on that. What's yours, Alison?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. I didn't know that thing about the sanitation laws. That's really interesting. I don't really have much to add other than to say, we tend to paint all of history with this idea that, everyone had a terrible life and they all died and they all, and I don't think that every tribe all throughout history at all times it's been kind of death at the door. Mm-hmm. The other thing I would say that even if our life is better with technology, like you say, with plumbing and a switch to turn on some heat, it still doesn't mean that we haven't got anything to learn from them. And I think that's what we're trying to do with this podcast. The idea that we're celebrating ancestral wisdom in a modern kitchen, because there are so many benefits to modern kitchens, and this is the world we're living in now. But we've forgotten the wonderful wisdom that our ancestors had in situations that often were harder than us. And so even when someone comes at you with that argument, it doesn't push away the fact that there's tons to learn from those who came before us, and we shouldn't necessarily think, like half the world does, that they were just the stupid ones in the past. That's how I feel about that.
I love it.
Okay, next question. This one is from Hannah, who is a supporter who lives in Belgium in Europe. She says, I'd love to know about Alison's past life. Mostly, I'm curious what exactly she did at Microsoft. Is she secretly the programmer behind it all? And what sort of skills she learned in that job that were perhaps transferable to now? Also, I think, Andrea, you mentioned university. How was the transition from home school to university? Okay. So, I used to work for Microsoft. I'm not secretly the programmer behind it all. I worked on support. So I was helping customers who are using the software to understand the software and make it work in their situations. So it was on the phone, emailing, and going out to customer sites.
Oh, all your favorite things.
And exactly. And exactly, IT. And then I also wrote a lot of documentation for them. So I started to realise as I was moving along in the job that actually I really enjoyed the writing, and I was really good at making really complicated things sound quite simple and systemizing them. So I used to write a lot of knowledge-based articles that people would find online. And, when we got a new piece of software, I would sometimes write the manuals for it. So that's what I did. And I worked in Reading, and I worked with some really nice people there. The skills that I learned in the job that are transferable to now, I would say one of the biggest skills I learned is that I am not willing to sit in meetings where no one actually comes forward with anything that the meeting was called for hours. I used to sit in meetings at Microsoft where people just droned on and on and on about the thing that wasn't even on the agenda. Or they start on talking about something and then they just go off on a tangent. And I'd be like, hang on, we're not here to decide this. And this is my whole afternoon. I could have been doing something else. Instead, we've been sitting in this room for 3 hours and we haven't even made a decision on the thing we were supposed to make a decision on. So that taught me kind of to push forward when trying to make decisions. And I never want to be in that position again. The other thing it taught me really was honed my taking complex things and making them simple. Through all of that writing over and over again, trying explaining to people and putting myself in other people's shoes. I was the one who knew all about the software, but the person who I'm talking to doesn't really know about the software. They know about their job and they're the expert in their job, not my job. And so translating the information that I knew that was probably too complicated for them into something that would help them. That's what I learned there. I also had lots of fun as well, because Microsoft do spend a lot of money on their employees, and I did some amazing things like go in a helicopter and shoot rifles and travel to places that I never will do again, probably. And it was fun.
Background.
So you talk about university, Andrea, and transitions.
Hey, Alison, on the meetings that is a pet peeve of a lot of people in business, and they found what is that study they did where they found that if people have meetings standing up, they cut them by like 70% or something.
Great.
So just
idea.
a little tip: if you think I'm taking too long on our podcast meetings, just make me stand.
Okay.
Transferring from homeschool to university. Beautiful. So most of us, of my 7 siblings and I, have done that. 2 of us chose not to, and that's just fine. And the way we did it was after finishing homeschool, then we started at the community college. So I don't know if Belgium or Europe has something like this, and I don't exactly know all the details of it, but it's, smaller colleges. And a lot of times they're really, really wonderful because you get maybe retired university professors who love teaching. So they want to keep teaching, but they don't want to be in all the political kind of scheme of the big university anymore. Like they're kind of done with that and they're not tenured or whatever. So they come and they teach smaller classes where you might have like 20 or 40 people instead of 200 to 300 people. So then all your 100 level classes and your 200 level classes, you get a lot more personal, like you actually get to talk to the instructor, not or they call them, they don't call them professors at community college. They call them maybe just teachers. I don't remember, but you get to talk to them and in person or meet with them in their office and things like that. And so I felt like I got really, really dedicated people who taught me my 1 and 200 level classes. And I only did 1 quarter at the university, and then I got married and I was like, bye. And I didn't keep going to school. But I loved it a lot and it was a lot of fun. And the transition as a homeschooler specifically, you're coming in with a community college transcript to the university, so that it's not so much concerned with your high school transcript at that point.
I see.
And they all of the teachers that I had at community college, and this is bragging on the principle of homeschooling, not me personally. Because they said this about all my siblings, they would say, whenever we find out there's a homeschooler in our class, it's a relief because we know they're not going to fight us on the homework. They're going to turn everything in. It's going to be really high quality, and they're probably really interested in what they're learning. And I think part of the reason is because homeschool, as a rule, you can, but homeschool largely tries not to kill the love of learning. And so we go into the colleges highly curious and with really good study practices because we've always had to self-motivate and we've always had to get ourselves to do our work instead of, a teacher badgering us to turn something in. Allison's probably like, where is this when it comes to the podcast?
I wasn't going to say anything, but
maybe I need to revive that turning in ability. But Alison, having the dates now is really helpful for me because yes. I do thrive with that. But anyways, so it was a great transition, and all of my siblings that have chosen to go on to university have done great. We've all had 4.0 GPAs, and my oldest sister, went on to master's program, and so it's pretty good. Okay, I'm going to read a question from Amelia, who is a supporter in Wales, and Alison has gone out with her and Gabe and done archaeological digs. So this question is very appropriate. She said, to both of you, if you could go anywhere in the world in any time to taste or experience the food that was being eaten there and then, where would you go and why? We don't have time for this question. This is like
No, this is a huge, difficult question because when I saw it, I thought, oh my gosh, but there. Then, oh no, there. I found it very hard to get it down to one. Like you said, I think this could be a whole episode. Do you want to go first with yours? Because I'm curious to hear yours.
Sure. I feel like Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago would be really good. It just feels like...
So you'd be making some beer.
Exactly.
Some ale.
Indus Valley type stuff. I just feel like so much of civilization today started way back when and way back there. And I feel like with Amelia, my most favorite category of history is prehistory, or in the Bible, my favorite book is Genesis, because it's all this like way old tribes fighting each other and stuff. And it's like, what are these people even doing? It's just such a different world that it's even hard to imagine. And life was so much more savage, and nobody had toilets. And it's just so interesting to me. And I want to see, how were they really eating, and what were they really eating, and what did it really feel like to chew that bread, and what did it really smell like when you baked it on stones, and what was it like eating a goat that you roasted over a stove, and were you just wolfing down intestines, or what's the story? I just want to know. So,
wow.
Yeah, that's probably
nice.
me.
Can you, when you do that, can you report back about the ale to me, please?
Yeah, well, what if I die of dysentery? I don't know.
Oh. Yeah, report back before you die on your deathbed, please.
I probably don't have the right stomach bacteria to survive back then, right? I'd probably just
maybe not.
die within an hour. But yes, Alison, after I come back from that, I will give you the report. What about you?
Thank you. Well, my favourite period of history, very slim period, is the Tudors and Stuarts in the UK. Yes. And my fascination with ale, proper ale before hops came on the scene, like from 1400, 1500, 1600. By the time I got to 1700 and 1800, hops were in all beers. I want to go back to Henry VIII's reign. Obviously, I don't want to be someone who is in a field with no food and snow everywhere. I want to be in the court somewhere, just kind of able to sit on the outskirts and kind of watch. But I really want to know what the ale tasted like in this country before hops came along, and what we've done to beer now, because I'm making this in my kitchen and I really don't know whether my version tastes like how it used to taste. So I would just love to go back and taste that, see how it was made, go and look around the kitchens, have a trencher bit of bread with my food served on it, and then see what it's like to eat the bread at the end, or throw it to the dog. I'd love to see the big feasts with the bird inside the bird inside the bird inside the bird. I read last year Hilary Mantel's trilogy of books about Thomas Cromwell, Henry VIII's advisor, and they were staggering. The detail, the historical kind of research she did, the storytelling. And, very often Cromwell was eating bread and ale. So he'd have a dish that I've made at home, which is bread with cheese on the top and then ale poured over, put in the oven. And it was she brought him and his life to life with such richness. And so I'd like to go back and try the things that he had, and try the beer, I think, mainly.
Awesome. Okay. Well, can you read us the last question that we brought in from the patrons? It's a really good one. Okay. And it's another one that
this is another
spend all day on.
Yeah, I agree. This is another question from Tilsha, who's in Washington. And she said, if either or both of you were empress of the world for a day, what would you force the world to do? This would be fun to hear your individual responses and a response together. Okay, so Andrea, what would you force the world to do?
Okay, well, every time I try to answer this, then I answer it. My gut response is always the same, but then I get really literal and I'm like, yes, but here's my gut response. If everybody stopped using the supermarket system, the world would change. There would be small farm jobs and small farm livelihoods for everybody. Homesteading would be super popular again. Everyone would have a productive kitchen. Like a lot of plastic would be gone, and there would be health and prosperity for all. Of course, that's the best case scenario. I just feel like we have the tools, the sanitation, the PVC piping, and the electric fencing to do a lot of things that our ancestors were doing, and we can do it on millions of small scale operations and be very, very successful at the way lifestyles could have been with all the advantages of modern world. But we need the village to be able to reconnect a lot of these dots that like Allie's talking about trying to reconnect. Of course, I immediately think of, the swathes of peasants that would starve and things. So it's like, but let me just stick with the happy vision. So I would get rid of supermarkets.
So you know what? That was the first thing I thought of when I read this question.
Really?
And then I thought, but you have to actually destroy the supermarkets because otherwise, if you just did it for a day, then the next day, everyone would just go back to the supermarket.
Oh,
so you've actually got to blow up or do something to destroy the supermarkets. I was like, well, I don't know what I'd get them to do, because the thing that I want is to stop people shopping at supermarkets.
Right.
But if it was just for a day, they're all just going to go out to a restaurant for the day and then come back and shop at the supermarket the next day.
Okay, well, I was empress for a day and I killed all the other emperors, so now I'm empress forever. So
okay, so there's no parliament in your world.
I am the tyrant.
Okay,
I get that. What would you do, Alison?
So the first thing I thought of was the supermarkets, and you know how strongly that I feel about that too. And we will have an episode at the beginning of next year, another one on supermarkets, because I just can't stop. But I think, when I thought about that, a story came to mind which I would share with the listeners, which is kind of a bit sort of allegorical, but related to this question. So before we moved back to England, Rob and I had a couple of hours off on a day that was quite sunny. And we were going to pick up Gabriel from the Steiner school that he was at in Florence. And we had a few hours beforehand. And we went and we sat in a park by the Arno River. And along the Arno, there are lots of parks. So just quite narrow strips, but they have play areas, maybe a basketball court. They have benches. Sometimes there's little cafes there. And then when you move away from that back into Florence, there is a massive road, like a massive two-way, like at least 2 lanes on both sides, if not 3. There's always cars parked on it. There's always loads of cars going along it. And the park is so nice, but the juxtaposition of, these beautiful old monuments and the park and the river and then this massive road. And I was sitting there with Rob, enjoying the sun that day that we had time to share. And we were both just looking at the cars and we must have been thinking the same thing, which, happens sometimes. And he said to me, you know what? One day they'll melt all those down and make bicycles out of them. And I think I fell in love with him just a little bit more in that moment because I was just thinking, all of these cars, everyone's rushing around. And all the food's coming in from goodness knows where, thanks to them. If we didn't have that, it would be painful. A lot of things would be painful, pretty much like getting rid of the supermarkets. But then we'd have to go locally to get our food. We'd have to be out and use our feet and our legs. And, it's not realistic for one day, but I would get rid of cars in my unrealistic world. and give everyone a bicycle for free.
I love it. And the gas or petrol aside, just like you said, just the sheer speed at which we get things done with cars is part of the harm of them, and feeds back into Allie's question about how did people do things? Well, they couldn't do them very fast, so nobody expected them to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good one, Allison. All right. So we're at an hour plus, and I want to know if you have time for you and me to ask each other a couple questions and go into overtime.
Okay. Yeah, I do. And actually, I've got a question for you as well.
So let's give the people what they want and make it a really long episode. So let's take a quick ad break and then jump back in with a couple questions from you and me to each other. All right. You ready?
I am. Yeah. Shall I go first?
You go first.
Yeah. So I know you have shared this with me, but I really would like you to share it with the rest of the world, if possible. Explain how you met Gary, please.
Yes.
Your husband.
Well, we were both let out of prison on the same day. So actually what happened was we were both going to the same flight school, and when you go to flight school, you just, at least the one that we were at, you just meet with your instructor and you go fly. You don't go to a class or something. So you would never really meet another student. But there's a forum on MySpace where you could go in and ask questions with pilots and things like that. And actually, very funny, Gary's mom saw me in there and she was like, I feel like Gary. I'm not joking.
I didn't know that bit.
She was like, kind of hinted to him like, this person asked this question or answered this question or something, and you should like go respond or whatever. So she kind of inadvertently set us up. And then Gary messaged me and was like, oh yeah, we could go get a burger or something. And I was like, sure, yeah, whatever. Super homeschooled, super obvious. Hannah, forget about university. Ask homeschoolers how they accidentally either flirted with or turned down dates from tons of people, and you'll get some long conversations. I was the only female at any of the flight schools at that airport. And so I just wrote off all male pilots, and I was like, oh, male pilots, whatever, blah. And so I wasn't really piqued at all. But there was a bunch of the pilots and other homeschoolers getting together at a friend's house in the area. So I had suggested to him, well, why don't you meet me and my sister at this supermarket parking lot, and we'll go from there to this party. Because I was like, well, if we meet and he's like a total axe murderer, at least he doesn't know where the party is. And I can leave him at the supermarket. What more horrible place to leave someone, right? So, so he drove up to the parking lot, at the same time as I did. We were texting or MySpacing or whatever we did in those days. I don't remember. And my sister had gone into the store to buy cream. And so I was sitting in the car, and when she got out, she locked the car with her beeper. And so I didn't realize that. So when Gary walked over, I opened the car door and it set off the alarm. So he walks up and the car just like, honk, honk, honk. And I remember the first thing I thought as I saw Gary walk up and the car alarm was going off, I thought, oh my gosh, this is the meeting story that I'm going to have to tell our kids, that the car alarm was going off.
Oh.
Isn't that wild? That's the first thing I thought. Yes. And he met, and we kind of like talked for a minute, and then Rebecca came out of the store and he followed us to the party. And homeschool parties are very like, I don't know what people think when they think homeschool party, but think pizzas and bottled water. Like they're not very intense. But when I later met with all the guys that Gary worked with on his ironworking job, we all went out to dinner at this like place in Seattle, some pub or something. And we're all sitting there chatting, and they're like, oh, this is so nice meeting Andrea, whatever. And then Gary got up to go to the bathroom, and the second he left, all these huge ironworker guys like clustered around me, and their like leader was like, listen, I don't know who you are, but you better not be here to screw up this guy's life because all he talks about is you. And he's like really into you. And so if you're just playing with him, you need to tell us now so we can break your legs. And I was like, what? I was like, yeah, I think we're pretty like, yeah, that's cool. And one of them told me later that after Gary and I met at the grocery store when we were driving like the 2 miles to our friend's house for that homeschooler party, that he called and was like, yeah, I basically just met my wife. So
wow.
we both, and my mom also said the minute she met Gary, she was like, oh yeah, this Andrea's done for. Like, this is who Andrea's going to marry. Better, she said, I better get used to him being around right now. And yeah, from the day we met, I think we saw each other basically every day until we got married, like a year later or something.
When did you get married?
Well, Gary would have got married like that month or the next month. He was ready to get married right away. And I thought in my head, oh, you know, a couple years, I'll finish university, no big deal. And then one time we were talking about it, and Gary was like, I was like, so when would you envision getting married? And he was like, I don't know, like by the end of the year. I was like, what? Like, what? He's like, yeah, what were you thinking? I was like, I don't know, like school, a couple of years. And he's like, what? So anyways, that was our meeting.
Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
So now you have to tell me, Alison. I want to know how you and Rob met, plus the accidental almost not meeting of the concert.
Yeah. Oh, so Rob and I first met in central London on Oxford Street.
Oh my gosh, could you be more British?
On the third floor of a college, because we were both studying to be teachers of the Alexander technique. That's another thing from my past. And I'd started the course before him, and then Rob joined. And we met there, and he kept trying to draw me on conversation, and I was kind of hesitant. Historically, I've been more confident writing my views than speaking them. I didn't grow up in a family that elicited my views on anything. So it's been a journey. Anyway, so Rob was trying to get my views because he really thought I was nice, and I was just not doing any of it. He asked me to a couple of concerts, and I was like, not sure. I thought he was weird, frankly. I thought he was a bit weird. I was trying to keep my distance from him. And
that's amazing.
Looking back, he told me there was one weekend where I was leaving college to go to Devon to do yoga for the weekend, and I had a pink suitcase with me. And he distinctly remembers sitting in the studio, and I was leaving, wheeling my pink suitcase out, and he just heard this voice in his head that said, "Wherever you go, take me with you. Take me with you. I'll go with you." And he wasn't intending to say that, and considering I took him with me to Italy, it's kind of a foretelling. Anyway, I left the course, didn't finish. He left the course, didn't finish. And then we didn't really talk to each other again until I was back with my parents, really not very well at all. And he was recording a demo at a studio of his music. And he thought, you know what? Alison was really into music, maybe I should send her my demo. And he was like, no, I haven't spoken to her for 9 months. So I'm not going to send her my demo. And then my email got a virus on it, which sent him one of those Chinese electronics emails. And in that moment, he thought, oh, sod it. I'm going to send her
I love
this.
it.
And so he sent me the demo. I listened to it. I was kind of in quite a vulnerable place because I'd been very ill. And so we started this conversation back and forth on email, which we've still got copies of, pages and pages of emails. And that resulted in us meeting up in London for a kind of a first date. And I remember my friend saying to me, I texted her and said, I don't know what to wear. I'm going to meet, Rob, and I don't think it's a date, but I don't know what to wear. She said, if you don't know what to wear, it's a date, definitely. If you can't decide, it's a date.
I love that.
Anyway, so we met on the River Thames in London, which is where we spent a lot of our courting days. We walked up to St Paul's Cathedral, back down, went into the Tate Modern, looked at some art, had a bit of food. And it was very, very nice. And that was kind of the beginning of our courting. The concert that you alluded to was, unbeknownst to us in that previous year, we'd both been at exactly the same concert at the Barbican. And neither of us had had anyone to go with. And
so eerie.
Both of us had gone independently, just on our own, sitting there like Billy No Mates. And we found out after talking to each other on one of those first dates that we'd both been at the same concert with no one
if
to go
that
to.
Doesn't mean
go with,
that you were meant for each other, I don't even know.
Well, just like you were saying with Gary, at the beginning of our relationship, Rob said he knew, literally, he said he knew when we were having those emails that we were going to be together. Something just clicked in him. He was just like, oh my gosh, this is it. Wow. He just knew. And I was like, nah, you're just having a bit of fun. And so he tried to be really careful at the beginning because he didn't want to scare me off. And so he was very restrained in what he was saying. And he also says that he thinks that I, all of my kind of fears and worries were kind of creating a barrier, but he could see things in me that I couldn't see. Which
that is the most beautiful thing.
Interesting.
And a partner is someone who can see and then maybe even draw out the aspects of you that you are hesitant to even reveal to the world. So
yeah, exactly. And he's done that for me in spades since we've been together. Oh yeah.
If anybody
creatively
wants to hear Alison and Rob interact, you have to go back and listen to the episodes they do together, because the way you guys, actually, I think probably my favorite that you have done together is the one on the private podcast where you and Rob did that follow-up to like the ways you're weird, basically. That was the best ever, because you're like, this is how we don't do things the way other people do things. I love that episode because the way you guys kind of interact with each other is such a good illustration. And then when I've gotten on Riverside a couple times or Zoom, and you'll be already on, and you don't know that I'm getting on because you're not looking at the screen, and you and Rob are just bantering or talking about something. And I just love it. The way you guys interact with each other is so beautiful. So that's such a fun story.
You. I think, Rob, I've got a question for you. Now, can we go on to our funny questions now that you don't know about? Because I tried to think, what funny question I've got for Andrew, and I just think I'm not funny. But Rob's got one, which is completely nonsensical and doesn't mean anything.
And I don't know what it is
anyway. So. He said, what is the most number of eggs you've eaten in one day, and how did you feel afterwards?
Oh my gosh, it's probably pretty high. It might be as high as like 10.
Wow.
Because I'm thinking of days when I ate deviled eggs or egg salad, and you can go through a lot of eggs, and I felt awesome. And kind of like a chicken.
I'll tell him.
So you can tell Rob. I've never felt bad from eating eggs, so I guess that's a good thing.
Okay, I'm gonna get him to guess when I go downstairs afterwards. Guess how many Andrew said.
Okay, I'll bet he gets it. He's pretty astute, so I've learned that about him. All right, Alison, here's my funny question for you. Can you say the rain in Spain falls mainly in the plain with an American accent?
Oh my gosh, no. I can say, hang on, let me try in an English accent first. I'll do it in my normal voice. The rain in Spain stays mainly on the plain. And then I could try and do it in a Queen's English. The rain in Spain stays mainly on the plain. Okay, now in American. The problem with America is there's too many American accents.
That's true.
The rain in Spain stays. No, I can't.
No, that was good. Keep going. I like that.
I don't even know where I am. The rain in Spain stays mainly on the plain.
Alison, if you were an American, nobody would listen to our podcast.
It's good that I'm not.
I'm just kidding. No, I love that. That was very good.
Do you know that every person who is not American now is trying to say that in an American accent and probably doing much better
Please
than
submit
me.
your audio clips to Discord so we can hear it. And all the Americans, please submit your British accent one to the Discord.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'll be the judge.
Okay, Alison. I have one last question for you.
Your notes.
That's
there.
my notes. My very last question. I wanted to end the year with a slightly more introspective touch. And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot as we're coming to the end of the year. And I've been wondering a lot what you're thinking about it. And so I'm going to ask you, what is something or what are some things you have learned about yourself through these past 3 years of podcasting and working with another very different personality? That's me. And are things what you expected? Is it different than you thought? What has surprised you? Just want to hear what you have to think about that.
Okay. So I think I would say that what I've learned is that there are so many people out there who are enthusiastic about and interested in the things that I've been doing in my kitchen for a long time. You know, I felt so alone before I started the podcast. I kept looking for podcasts to listen to. There must be someone talking about this, and there wasn't. And I didn't know, putting this stuff out there, whether there would be any response at all. And the fact that there have been just people from all over the world that not only want to do this stuff in their kitchen and want to know how I do it, you know, so I'm being of use and of service, which is amazing. But they also want to talk to each other, and they also are willing to give us a little bit of support every month so that the masses of effort that goes into the podcast is remunerated. And that feels absolutely amazing to me that it was a little kind of idea and I felt alone. And then having met you and enacted this together, it's created something that I just did not know was there. And it feels wonderful every time I get any feedback saying how much our episodes have helped people, or how much people love my courses, or how much, you know, that support has changed the way that they are health-wise or the way that they feel. I would say interacting with you has been an incredible learning experience for me. First of all, I've learned just how anal I am, you know, that I'm just so dogged, persistent and determined, and how that is not necessarily how everyone else is. And that has shone a light on me to say, well, you know, do you really need to be like this, Alison? You know, where are you taking this too far, and how can you let go of this, loosen your grip a bit? I also think that through creating this thing with you, you've taught me so much about ways of doing things that I would not have thought of myself, ways of being, ways of creating things, ideas. And that has made something between the two of us that is bigger than what either of us could have made by ourselves. And I've always, in the past, been kind of scared of collaboration, because I know that if I just do something myself, then it's my fault if it goes wrong, or I can just always rely on myself to just push if I've got to get something out and I don't want to. And putting yourself out for collaboration is a vulnerable thing to do, but it's shown me just how much you can get from collaborating with someone who in a lot of ways is not the same as you. You know, in our hearts, we're definitely the same in the way we cook or the way we live, things we believe in, and that's really vital. That comes across in everything. But our methodologies and our lives do have differences, and yet that's made the podcast better. Those differences have made the podcast better, which is just amazing. It's something that is of itself now. It's not of me, it's not of you. It's something that is of us together, and that's been a huge learning curve for me. How about you? I'll brace myself.
No, Yeah, this is it. A podcast is a ton more work than I ever would have thought. I mean, I knew it would be a lot of work, but it's a lot more. There's so much more behind the scenes. So much. When I listen to podcasts with a different ear now, and I just think, you know, I always had respect for podcasters, but a lot more now because I see, you know, I've seen behind the veil or how the sausage is made or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work to put together all the, you know, things that go into making a podcast. And so that's been revelatory for me. And throwing back to Hannah's question about the university and me saying how I was such an astute student, this is something I've discussed with other homeschool moms as well, because something that I think only discovered because of the podcast is I've more or less self-diagnosed myself with ADHD. And I don't know that that would have been highlighted to me if I was not working on a project with you, because if I push my own deadlines, only I know it, and it doesn't really affect anything. But then I kept running into these walls where you'd be like, hello, Andrea, are you there? Are you dead? Like, do I need to call Gary?
I didn't quite say that.
Almost, Allison. You hired a VA to chase me, okay? Megan. But I've never collaborated with somebody on a project to this extent. So I only ever knew myself on my own timelines. And a lot of homeschool moms have said, yeah, in college or university, I was the star student because that was my hyper focus and I didn't have kids and that's all I did. And I totally hyper focused on college. Like, I was not the smartest student, but I studied 10 times harder than everybody else. So my grades looked really good. And that's because that's all I did. I didn't go hang out with people or do anything or have any life. I was interested in nothing but studying. And that was all that I did. And I know people say that for women, a lot of times they mask their ADHD symptoms hard. And then when they have kids, they come back and bite them. And they realize how pulled they are in different directions. So the podcast has made me have to face that kind of a demon in myself and say, what? How can I still meet deadlines without dying and cope with words like schedule and other things that used to be anathema to me? And I remember you saying one time, you know, oh yeah, waiting this long for something to be turned in would have normally given me kittens, but now with you, I'm kind of like numb to it or something. And
yeah, I'm getting more used to it.
Your standards are slipping the more time you spend with me.
No, but I trust that you work in a different way to me, whereas I would try and do it up front and get it out of the way.
Which is smart, honestly.
I've come to understand that working with you don't work that way. So it doesn't matter if it's not done like 2 days before or whatever, because you don't think like me.
Well, there's this...
And there's so many other things that brings,
that's
you know?
True. And there's this weird aspect of this life of mine that I've discussed with a lot of other moms who are similar, and that's the concept of a deadline. And I don't know why, and maybe somebody else listening can say yes or no to their experience with this, but we work really well with deadlines as long as we get to go right up to the deadline. But for whatever reason, doing it early doesn't, I don't know what it is. There's like this cortisol push that we get or something, and I've done this myself where I wrote something and then it, you know, got lost or deleted or, you know, whatever. And then but when I rewrote it at the last minute, it was 10 times better than the first one. Yeah. And I've always thought that was just me until talking to all these other moms who are like, no, there's this whole idea around the deadlines where like you need a deadline for one. Like you've said to me before, oh, you don't have to do this by any time. And I'm like, don't say that, Allison. You have to tell me there's a deadline or it will literally never happen. But I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is. And sometimes I do things in advance and I think, wow, this is how other people's life is. That's kind of amazing.
But you know what? It probably isn't, because, you know, you work best in that kind of deadline looming thing because of the wiring of your brain particularly. But for me, if I know there's a deadline, I just get really anxious about it for the entire time until it's done. So when I used to work in accounts before Microsoft, I knew that month end was coming, and I just dreaded month end right up until month end. I was just like, can we just do month end now and get it over and done with? Because I'm just worrying about all the deadlines that are flying around in my head. And so for me, the anxiety of not having done it would way outweigh the energy that I'd get from a last minute push. I'd just be in pieces by then, and I wouldn't be able to create whatever I was creating. So it's different experiences and different wiring our brain that makes us different.
Well, that's interesting, Alison, because for me, I would think, oh, good, I don't need to think about it for another 30 days.
But I can't stop. I can't stop thinking about it.
That's so funny. But yeah, that is a good window into different ways that our brain works. But one thing that I think is I can already taste the flavor in the air that has helped me a lot is this routine-based schedule that we've imposed for our next year of recording, where I can see predictably what days are a thing. Like, despite being a person who professes to love spontaneity, I am just a cow in the sense that I want my bucket in the same place and I want to walk up the same hill at the same time every day. Like, I really thrive with the routine, because within the routine, then I get to think spontaneously or creatively or whatever it is I'm trying to do. And try to meet Alison's deadlines and have Megan not chase me with a stick or whatever she's going to do. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what she does.
She can't reach you from canvas with a stick, can she?
She might try. Oh, Alison, this was so much fun. I loved answering all these questions with you, and I love recording with you, Alison. This is, I know people are always shocked when I say we haven't met in person, because then I'm shocked because it feels like we have, because we've spent a couple hours together every week for over 3 years now. And it's just been amazing recording with you and Rob saving us all the time, and Gary saving us all the time, and Gabe and the kids over here keeping things interesting and light and sending weird emails about rocks and beavers and stuff like that. Yeah. But this has just been such a wonderful ride, Alison, and I seriously have fallen in love with your family, and I love getting to sit down with you. Tuesday mornings are just so special to me when we record.
We love you too. We love you too. And we've just got the most amazing body of work that, we just had fun doing and just chatting, just the two of us. And it's all there. And I can't believe it sometimes when I look back at the feed. I think, gosh, we did that. Know. That's quite amazing. Where did that happen?
Hours and hours of content that we've created. And then I go over into the private podcast and I'm like, there's even more. And then all the stuff we've written in the ebooks we've created just for the podcast, just as support to episodes. And then we've got Ash, and then Megan, and just all the amazing help that we have. And then the patrons just pouring fuel on the fire and keeping things ticking along.
Yeah. They're wonderful.
I know. This is just an amazing endeavor to do a podcast, because it is very collaborative, both between each other and then our community coming in to, keep us going.
Yeah. And it's just all come out of nothing. That's what astounds me. It's just, we're just two girls, and we thought, okay, let's give this a go. And we didn't have a big plan or anything. And it's been lovely.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word went on the podcast.
Yeah.
And the Word became flesh. What a great episode. Alison, it is time for me to eat breakfast. And I'm going to go eat breakfast.
Okay, that's
And you need
good.
to go tell Rob how many eggs I ate.
Yeah, I'm going to. I'll tell you. I'll send you an email and tell you what his guess was.
All right. Until next time, Alison.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Until next year.
What? Until next year.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
If you'd like to support the podcast, you can join as a patron. Choose from various levels starting at $5. You can see what we offer at ancestralkitchenpodcast.com.
While you're there, check out our favourite books, supplements and kitchenware, or give a one-time donation.
Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.
And if you know someone who would love our show, tell them about us.
You are helping to bring ancestral food wisdom into modern kitchens, changing the world one plate at a time.